Mr. Chairman, we are live.
Okay, we'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome all of you that are here in the room and those who are joining us virtually. And we will start by taking roll, please.
Okay, Representative Andrew? Here. Representative Brown? Representative Connolly? Here. Representative Harshman? Representative Nyman?
Here.
Representative Newsom? Here. Representative Obermuller? Here. Representative Summers?
Here.
Chairman Paxton?
Here. We're going to start with where we left off with House Bill 106. And we have only one more meeting before we are finished with all the House bills, and we have a stack of House bills to take care of. So as we try to work our way through these bills that we have today, let's keep that in mind that we have some folks out there that spent some time preparing these bills and are ready to come and talk to us about them, and certainly would like to have them have the opportunity to bring their bills forward. So we are going to continue with House Bill 106. And I think where we left off, we had a couple people, maybe two or three virtually, that wanted to make comments in favor of the bill. And so Clarissa, if you can see if we have some hands raised and for people who would like to speak in favor of the bill. And I'm gonna be pretty harsh on this today because we're going to limit this to 2 minutes, 2 minutes only. And if Vice Chairman Brown will keep time for me, we've got to move along, and hopefully you'll bring something new that we haven't talked about before. So with that, Clarissa, who do we have on board here?
Mr. Chairman, first up, we have Tate Mullen, and then we have Paul Kane, and then Sheila Leach. And those are all the folks who raised their hands.
Okay, if you would introduce yourself, and brevity is appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen. I am the Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. I had some lengthy comments prepared, but I will keep them brief today. The first and most substantial point is that even though the Supreme Court decision last term voided a Montana constitutional provision as it applied to public school funding, the point is that the Wyoming constitutional provision is the law of the state, and the legislature can assume that this should be overturned. Funding for private schools and religious schools violates the language of the state constitution. We are concerned about oversight mechanisms. We are concerned with accountability mechanisms within this bill. We are concerned with funding and what the impact would have on some of our smaller districts. We also are concerned about the special education provisions. We're struggling terribly to fund public schools. This is not the time to start an experiment to see how many students would participate or how it impacts public schools. Expanding funding to include a variety of other private schools is an expensive experiment that we cannot afford right now. So on and against this bill, and I will stand for any questions.
Okay, maybe I didn't make that clear. I'm asking for people who are in favor of it first, and then we'll go to the ones that are against. So anyone else in favor of the bill? Do we have anyone out there, Clarissa, that is actually in favor? The other two people that were admitted were in favor or against?
Mr. Chairman, Paul Kane has his hand raised, so I believe he's in favor, but Sheila Leach does not have her hand raised.
Okay.
So she is against it.
Go ahead. Please.
Howdy.
Yes.
My name is Paul Kane. I serve as education executive for the Wyoming district of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I oversee our Lutheran schools. But day to day, I'm a parish pastor and headmaster of a classical Christian grammar school and academy in Sheridan. I interact with scholars, educators, staff, and parents every day. I teach guitar, I lead chapel, and I am the principal's office. I teach logic and rhetoric, and we teach our students how to think, not merely what to think. That's one reason this bill needs to advance to the floor of the House to offer others the possibility of an education like this. Consider the following written testimony from one of my teachers in the trenches. He writes, "I want you to imagine a humble teacher in a schoolhouse of 17 children. These citizens are all in grade school. They're doing math, language arts, Latin, history, science, everything. They are enjoying their freedom in Wyoming." He says, "I teach them every day, see their faces every day. These children are Wyoming citizens. Wyomingites love their freedom. This bill maximizes freedom for citizens even as little as these. Imagine a future for Wyoming children, your own young citizens, with financial freedom to be taught, loved, and cherished
30
by
seconds.
teachers of their own choosing."
You got 30 seconds to wrap it up, please.
These are comments from the Reverend Rene Castellero. He couldn't appear before you today. He's teaching school. I urge the committee to advance this bill to the whole House for consideration. Your fellow representatives deserve the opportunity to consider it and adopt it. If it never sees the light of day, then what should I tell the other little citizens and their families? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else out there would like to speak in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, this is Sheila Leach. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it short. I'll make it shorter than I would have. I speak in support of the bill. Of concern to some people is whether this bill is constitutional because it might conflict with Article 1, Section 19 of the Wyoming State Constitution, which says appropriations for sectarian or religious societies or institutions prohibited. I will return to this shortly. Speaking of the Wyoming State Constitution, the preamble says, "We, the people of the state of Wyoming, grateful to God for our civil, political, and religious liberties, and desiring to secure them to ourselves and perpetuate them to our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution." In 1889, when the Constitution was written and signed, the people shared a common understanding that God referred to the Holy Trinity of the Christian Bible. They would be surprised, no doubt, to discover how thoroughly secularized the public school system has become. This year, I spoke to a local school board trustee to find out whether the documentary Divided Hearts of America could be shown to high school students, and was told to my astonishment that this would not be possible because the documentary is faith-based. In fact, it is a very balanced
You have 30
discussion of the
seconds,
issue of,
wrap it up, please.
I'm sorry?
You have 30 seconds left on your time.
Dear. Oh dear. Article 120, Section 23 reads, "Education, the right of citizens to opportunities for education should have practical recognition. The legislature shall suitably encourage means and agencies calculated to advance the sciences and liberal arts. The classical curriculum favored by
time is
many
up.
private schools
Time is up.
seems
Thank
to
you
meet
for your
this goal."
testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Mr. Chairman.
testimony.
Thank you.
Clarissa, do we have anyone else that would wish to speak in favor? Maybe just one more before we move on?
Mr. Chairman, I do not see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay, let's move over to those who are stand in opposition to this. We'll start with the folks out there. Clarissa, do we have any hands up now?
Mr. Chairman, we do. We have Mr. Shad Hamilton, and then there are 5 other folks with their hand raised in the waiting room.
Okay, remember we have a 2-minute limit, so go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, House Committee, thanks for listening to me. I'm Shad Hamilton, principal at Horizon High School. I represent the Wyoming High School Principals Association, WASP. I'm president-elect of that organization. I have some personal experience. I was a charter school principal for 10 years, and I shared with the Senate my views on that, and I think they're similar on this issue. I'll just cut to the chase. You know, with COVID, There are several multinational companies out there running online programs that are primed and ready to come in either under a private school opportunity like this or a charter school opportunity and open up their doors virtually. And we lost thousands of students this year to those virtual programs. And we're seeing them come back now, but they're coming back with fewer credits, behind, huge gaps. The companies are for-profit companies. And I have no doubt that, if something like this were to pass, they would hop on that and take it as an opportunity too. So I have real concerns about things like that. So I would be against it.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Who's up next, Clarissa?
Mr. Chairman, we have Douglas Pietersma up next, and then we'll have Jana Williams.
Okay, introduce yourself, please, and be respectful of our time, please.
Yes, sir. Chairman Paxton, members of the committee, I am Dr. Douglas Pietersma. I'm an education researcher, a homeschool father, and the director of Altametta Homeschool Auxiliary, which is a local business here in Cheyenne providing support to homeschool families. On behalf of myself, my business, and families that partner with my business, I stand against this bill. This may seem surprising, as this bill provides a tangible benefit to homeschool families such as mine in the form of monetary incentives. And the fact that my business has the potential to be a recipient of the funds may also surprise some. But I believe the authors of this bill had the best intentions towards those choosing alternatives to public school. And I, of course, support school choice. So I oppose this bill, even though it had the best intentions, because unintended consequences can also come out of this. As a principal, I stand against any entanglement of homeschool education and public school system, even when voluntary. And the proposed statute does exactly this by funding school districts for 1/2 or more of the dollars for a homeschool or private school student for which the district will provide little or no services. I stand against this legislation because it brings homeschooling under the auspice of the public schooling system. There are several major issues with the bill, and I won't reiterate what was talked about last Friday, but primarily the change in the definition of what constitutes a homeschooling family, adding those outside of the home. That is inevitably going to be driving changes in the future as this program would end up needing to regulate that particular definition and the resulting.
30 seconds.
Yes, sir. But most concern with anything is the fact that page 4, line 22 through page 5, line 5 indicates that the school district can demonstrate a homeschool curriculum does not meet basic academic educational program criteria, which goes against current statute and could very, very easily be transported over to those who do not participate in this program. Because of that, I stand against this bill, as do the majority of the families that associate with myself and my business. Thank you, sir.
Your testimony, and thank you for being respectful of our time. Next up,
Mr. Chairman, we have Ms. Williams up next, and then we'll have Dan Beasley.
okay, please introduce yourself and tell us who you represent.
My name is Jana Williams. I live in Uintah County. I have been homeschooling my children for 28 years, and I teach how to homeschool classes every fall, and I've helped well over 100 families get started in their homeschooling journey. I tell you this not to pat myself on the back, but to let you know that I have a lot of experience working in homeschooling and dealing with the public school system as it relates to homeschool. I've had a similar experience. We moved here from Alaska 17 years ago. There is a similar program in Alaska. It was great when it started, but the public schools took more and more and more freedom away from the homeschoolers, and it affected the people that even chose to opt out of the program. I like the idea of helping families start to homeschool, and I'd be in favor of this if it could be amended where it protects the families that are already homeschooling. We don't want to give up the freedom that we already have. My suggestion, I'm not coming just to be against this bill, but to offer a suggestion for an amendment. The homeschool laws in Wyoming could be amended to be similar to Idaho or Alaska, In Alaska, all that's required
About
is
30 seconds to wrap up, please.
in Alaska, all that's required is a letter saying that you no longer your children will no longer be attending public schools. That would protect the homeschoolers who decide to opt out of this program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony. Who's up next?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Beasley is up next, and then we'll have Diane Pendergraft.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dan Beasley. I'm a staff attorney for HSLDA, that's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, a national nonprofit organization. We have over 100,000 member families across the nation. And for 4 decades, we have advocated to preserve the liberty of parents to educate their children at home. I'll be brief. I did submit written comments. I won't read those. I'll just highlight one thing, and that's that if the committee is inclined to move this bill forward, we would suggest an amendment to preserve the liberty of homeschooling families who do not wish to participate in the program. The bill, as introduced, does not include a clean legal distinction between programs that wish to participate in the new government-funded option program and those that do not. So homeschoolers who do not participate could still be affected by future efforts to regulate the homeschooling legal option. For decades, homeschool families have advocated for rolling back government intrusion, not seeking government help. Homeschooling has multiplied and thrived despite a hands-off relationship with government funding. And so while I believe the bill is well intended, I believe we have a technical amendment that would provide sufficient clarity to distinguish between homeschooling programs that choose to participate in the program and those that do not. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Chairman. I'll stand for any questions if any remain.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for being respectful of our time. Who's next?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Pendergraft is next.
Okay, go ahead, please.
And Mr. Chairman, she just needs to turn on her video and unmute her mic. We also have Miss Sarah Bennett in the meeting, if she'd like to unmute.
Okay, very sorry. My name's Diane Pendergraft and I live in Sheridan. I homeschooled my own 3 children who are now adults. I taught in a Christian school for 10 years. And for the last 3.5 years, I've been working with homeschoolers again. I'll keep this very short because I agree with all of the points that have been made previously of those who are not in favor. My main concern is the parts that specifically address homeschoolers, particularly where it says a curriculum submitted by a parent or guardian shall be presumed to meet the requirements of a basic academic educational program unless otherwise demonstrated by the school district. Currently, the required intent to homeschool form is strictly for the purpose of ensuring that every child in the state, once reaching the age of 7, is in compliance with the compulsory attendance law. Nowhere in the statute are the school districts granted oversight of homeschool curriculum choices. Those 7 words, unless demonstrated otherwise by the school district, will open doors we may never be able to shut again.
Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
We have one more, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. We have Miss Sarah Bennett.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Like she said, my name is Sarah Bennett. Sorry, we've got an echo. I am currently homeschooling my 4 children. I've been a single mom for going on 3 years. And as someone who has taken government assistance before, I have been on the SNAP program. I've been on the WIC program. I've been on, my kids are on Medicaid. I understand what it takes for the government to give people money and the accountability that they need to have. And I understand that sometimes that's necessary. I lost my job from COVID and had to go out and start a business to support my kids. And I have managed to maintain homeschooling all the way through with the help of some family members. So I understand why anybody would be compelled to want that government assistance to figure out how to provide school choice for their kids. But as a homeschooler, I read through this bill, and in this, for the sake of time, I won't go through every line that stands out at me, but my biggest reaction is anytime you want to start collecting my personal information and having any accountability from me to you, I have a problem with that. I don't enjoy the way that the public school systems are run, which is why I've committed to homeschool my children. And so if they want any interference in my homeschooling, I will absolutely decline any sort of assistance. If you wanted to just cut me a check, that would be great, but I don't think any state in the union could afford what I'm worth to my kids. So I wholeheartedly oppose this bill. I think it came from very good intentions, but if anybody had asked the homeschool community what they thought about this first, I don't know that it ever would have been written. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. All right, that seems like we're going to end public testimony at this point in time. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Down there. Gotta move.
Okay,
With Andrew.
Representative Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, I move the bill.
Okay, the bill's been moved. Is there a second? Seconded. Okay. Any discussion on the bill? Oh, just a second. I think did you have your hand up? Representative Obermuller? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, when you look at how voucher systems have developed around the country, the concept has been to refund some of the money that folks pay into the public school system. The idea being everybody should participate in paying their taxes into the system, but because of wanting to support private education, maybe part of that money gets refunded. This is a totally different idea. This is trying to grab a piece of the state's guarantee of education, regardless of whether you put any money into the system or not, the way I read it. So you look at, when you look at page, starting at the bottom of page 2, including documented expenses for tutoring, tuition, fees, curriculum, supplemental materials, and activities. That's pretty broad. And that gets that family basically half the money from the school foundation program, but in a situation where they may have put nothing into the system, paid nothing into it. And then for me, there's also an issue of when you look at private schools within, let's say, take a church setting, there are a lot of scholarships in those environments. Members provide scholarships to the neediest of the kids so that they can go to that private school. I think this bill basically undoes that. Their focus will turn to drawing money out of the school foundation program rather than supporting with their own scholarships. So those are my reasons for being against this bill, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I believe Representative Andrew, I think I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and in support of the bill, education is incredibly important to Wyoming, and this bill allows us to uphold the current system while providing the financial resources directly to parents who wish to choose an alternative option for their child. This is also important to me personally. I was both homeschooled and went to private school growing up, and I have a beautiful 1-year-old daughter. I'm a current parent faced with beginning the education of my child. And I am part of a large population of parents who wants to explore alternative options. And I believe all parents should have that choice and have access to the abundant funding the state puts towards education. This bill still allows us to fund our current system. At least half of the funds from the block grants go back to the school. And I think it's a really well thought out way to do this because we aren't sacrificing what we already have. We aren't risking just draining money from the current system. It's a very cautious approach, and I think it's probably a much better approach than other states have taken. So thank you.
Anyone else on the committee? Yes, Representative Knight.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I've had about as much feedback I could be buried in emails. It wouldn't be hard to do that. But I guess my thought on this is One of the testifiers spoke about this is not a time to experiment, but quite frankly, as we've looked at what we've just come through in the past year, and we see how education has changed, we see how the ability to deliver that education has changed, it makes me think about maybe this should be a time to realize that now is a time more than ever to think outside of the box, to look at how we educate our children, to look at what we do. And, quite honestly, from the fiscal standpoint, I don't have any kids in school, but I pay 70% of my property taxes in to go to education, to support, and glad to do it. But I personally don't have any children in there anymore. I paid property taxes when I had kids in there, but my property taxes are still going into the system in order to supply dollars to make sure that our youth get educated for our state. And if we can look at different options here, and I think this needs to go out to the floor to have the opportunity to have a good and robust debate, not saying whether it will survive or fail, but I think the discussion needs to begin, and that there's other ways that we can look at education and the dollars that we spend. And are there ways that we could spend dollars wisely and allow parents more options and help them with that opportunity? Because, we need to get our kids educated, and we need to think about different ways of doing this. And I think this works towards that. It provides that vehicle to have the conversation, to look at options and opportunities, and to see where we maybe can improve on our current system. So that's why I think there's some amendments need to be made. And I realize that the homeschoolers spoke not for this, but several of them also did say that there was a process whereby we could amend this to make it more palatable for our homeschoolers. I think that should be looked at and given that opportunity on the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Yes, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. I really appreciate the bringer of the bill, and she made a really good attempt at finding a palatable solution to this dilemma that's been going on. But for me, it goes back to, are we providing school foundation dollars? Are we providing school foundation dollars without accountability? And ultimately, we are, by our Constitution, are required to provide an equitable, adequate education. And we make districts jump through all kinds of hoops to ensure that. And this is kind of a, here's the money, get out of jail free card with no accountability. And I just don't think we can do that with school foundation dollars. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow up on the good majority floor leader statement there. As I'm debating where I'm at on this bill, ultimately, I think one of the things that concerns me the most is a little bit of a Pandora's box if we do open this up and we do allow homeschoolers, anybody for that matter, an amount of money out of the guaranteed school foundation account. What does that do to the exact statement that the majority floor leader just said, an equitable education? Does that open the door to a lawsuit from somebody saying, well, now I only get half of what you give the kids in the public schools? And since you're only giving me half, that goes to the Supreme Court and they say, hey, look, you can't give only half. So that actually just may have just literally changed my mind on this, because as I look through this, I think that this was a well thought out opportunity and something that could absolutely be palatable in the future. But man, when I heard that, it does scare me, and a very major, serious issue.
Anyone else? Okay, do you want to walk through the bills page by page, or are you ready for the vote?
I think
Question.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's been some amendments proposed, and I would imagine the two gentlemen that moved the bill, I don't know if they have amendments or not, but I do know that there was proposed amendments. I don't know if maybe one of them would like to motion those forward.
Okay. Okay. All right, sensing you're ready to vote, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Representative Andrew,
Aye.
Representative Brown,
No.
Representative Connolly, Representative Harshman, Representative Nyman,
Yes.
Representative Newsom, Representative Obermuller,
No.
Representative Summers,
No.
Chairman Paxton.
No.
7 noes, 2 ayes.
Okay, the bill has failed. Moving on to our next bill. The next bill we have is House Bill 231. Representative McGuire. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you very much for your time. I bring to you House Bill number 231, college credit retention. There is a short one-page handout in your folder if you'd care to take a look at it. The issue is that of the 50 states, Wyoming currently ranks 44th in adults aged 25 to 45 with a bachelor's degree or higher. If you look at our population, and this is from the US statistics numbers, currently less than high school is a mere 9.7%. If you look at our high school graduation rate, thanks to the Mustangs, go Mustangs, our high schools are just knocking it out of the park. We're at over 90% of our kids are getting a high school graduation. But then you look at some college, it goes down to 37%, and you look at a bachelor's degree, it's 17%. And then when you look at graduate, it goes down even further to 10%. Now, if you look at other data sources, some of them look even worse if they look at the entire body. This is just looking at people who are in the 25 to 44-year-old range. If you look at the entire adult population of Wyoming, some say that we're 48th. And that's an issue. And it's due to a lot of things, our economy, the distance to colleges. We have a population where many people leave when they're in college and they go to work in the energy industry or healthcare. They start a family and they don't finish their college degree. Unfortunately, right now, when they do go back to their local college, they're often told, sorry, your credits are over 10 years old and they've expired. Now, if you hear testimony to the contrary, I can assure you that there is a disconnect between upper level management and the people who are meeting with the students on a face-to-face level. When asked the former president of the University of Wyoming and some current junior college presidents, I was told, well, it all has to do with our accreditation. And so I said respectfully, could you please show me in writing where due to the accreditation, you cannot take a credit over 10 years old? Well, then the story changed to it's not customary to accept college credit that's over 10 years old. So this bill does three things. First of all, it says any college credit earned from a Wyoming university or college with an acceptable grade will not expire unless the university or college can provide some reason that the credit is no longer relevant. And I'd use my own example. When I went to college back in the old days, I took Fortran computer, and I have used that exactly 0 times since I graduated from college. So if I went back to get a further degree and they said, I'm sorry, but your college credit, your computer programming won't apply to anything, I get that. That's completely reasonable. On the other hand, we have returning students that are told, and then the third thing that it does is if you do have a returning student and they're told that their credit cannot be used, the student at least has an opportunity to make their case before the Board of Trustees or the board's designated agent. So again, if I'm meeting face-to-face with a counselor and the counselor says, I'm sorry, but you took calculus 20 years ago and we can't accept your calculus, I want to ask why. Has calculus changed that much in the last 2,000 years? I mean, I looked at my daughter's calculus book and it looked exactly like the one that I used 30 years ago. And quite honestly, right now, if I needed to go out and calculate the capacity of a reservoir, I'd either get a $20 app on my phone or I'd go call an engineering firm and I'd have them do what they do. I wouldn't try and calculate it myself. So what we're doing here is we're just looking for a way that adults, when they want to come back, they can do so and they can have a straightforward conversation with the college or university. I would point out that these are tax-paying adults. These aren't kids. These aren't Hathaway Scholarship kids. These are adults who are willing to come back and spend their own money, pay full boat tuition. And it's opening up an avenue for these people to get the education that they need. And again, I would point out that the bill does not in any way, shape, or form, if that individual who wants to return got a D- in cultural anthropology and the college wants to say, hey, Ds don't transfer, that's completely reasonable and that's acceptable. I'm not trying to force anybody to take anything. It's just a matter of starting out with a presumption that the college credit has not expired, just like the presumption that you're innocent until proven guilty. The presumption is that the credit is good. And then if the university says, hey, it's Fortran or you got a poor grade or whatever, then at that point, the individual can make their case to the Board of Trustees or to their representative. And if they fail, they fail. It's not, we're not taking them to court or anything like that. But I can kind of bring it together a little bit. When I was sitting here last Friday and I was listening to the testimony, our good representative from the Bear Lodge commented that he thought that colleges were in the business of educating people, and everybody kind of got a little giggle about his naivete with that comment. And it all kind of came together at that point. And I understand. A high school kid who gets out and can't decide if he wants to be a fry cook or a brain surgeon, that's what our colleges are dealing with right now. This bill is dealing with a different individual. And I'll tell you the story of one of my constituents. I'm going to call him Tom. And our good representative from the high school in my county may know some of his kids. He was running an oil field service business in my house district. They were grossing about $10 million a year. And this summer, through no fault of his own, the parent company decided to close it. And this was a big company. He had 30 or 40 employees at any given time. He was doing, he had about $16 million in equipment in his yard at any time. So rather than pull his kids out of school, he decided that he's going to take this window, he's going to go back and he's going to finish his 4-year degree. And then when his kids are ready to graduate, then he'll make the next move, whatever that may be. So he went up to our local college and sat down, and they told him exactly, I'm sorry, it's been over 10 years since you've gone to college, so none of your credits will transfer that you got prior to going back to work. So he got up, he picked up his checkbook, and again, this is a guy, he was ready to pay full boat. There was no argument about price or anything else. He just wanted to know 2 things. How long is it going to take, and how many courses am I going to have to take? And so he went online, and there happens to be a 4-year university that offers college level courses, bachelor courses. Some of them are on our local college campus. And so through a combination of online classes and taking courses at our local college, in 2 years, he's going to finish his bachelor's degree. And I would present to you that he will probably get the highest grades of anybody in his courses because he's absolutely serious, he's totally motivated, and he's there to get the job done. He's not there to sit around the student union and talk about fry cooks. He's there to get this, to make the next step in his life. And so that's what I'm talking about. That's the people that I think that we need to address. And so if you hear further testimony, I would just invite you to keep in mind, again, this is a real life situation. This is my constituent. This is what he was told. So if you hear differently, then again, there's a disconnect, and that's the purpose of the bill. On the other hand, if it doesn't make any difference, well, fine. Just put it in the green books and it's just a fail-safe. It falls back, but I think that it will make a difference. I'd also ask you to think about, while other people may be testifying, think about the top paragraph in the handout. Clearly, again, Wyoming high school education, we're great. We're knocking it out of the park. When it comes to college, we have our issues. And when it comes to people coming back to college to finish their degree, the question is, what are we doing to fix that? Yes.
I hate to interrupt, but I want to tell, I'm a co-sponsor on this bill, but I have to go across the hall to present another bill. So I really appreciate, I'll leave my aye vote. I appreciate your, so I don't want to come across rude when I get up and walk out. That's what I want to do.
Okay. But anyway, I would bring up, think about Endow. Remember that study that we did a couple of years ago, spent a lot of money on it, brought in a lot of people. And one of the main things that they addressed was the fact that we have a problem with our workforce education. and we need to enhance and bring back adults. And they called for the goal, if you remember, by 2025, a goal of 67% of Wyoming's adult population between the ages of 25 and 64 to attain higher education. Currently, we're at 37%. We're supposed to make it to 67% in another 3 or 4 years. And I would ask you to think about, in your district, what's going on? What are the local colleges doing to help bring people in and encourage them to take that next step in their education? In my particular district, I've got a pretty good finger on the pulse of what's going on. I'm a member of 3 different nonprofit boards, Rotary, the Chamber, and in my district, I can't say that I've seen anything that said, okay, adults, come in and we will help you move towards that next step in your educational goal. It may be different in your district. I don't know. So those are the challenges. I would finally add that some of our colleges, and maybe my college, is its own worst enemy. You know, pre-COVID, things were starting to change and things were starting to go online. But now with COVID and my kids that are at the university, the majority of their courses are now online. So now we have this big change that may happen. And we've got people that are going to start shopping, just like my friend Tom, who went out of state. And every dollar that he spends for his bachelor degree is going out of state, never to return. And those dollars should stay here. And, you know, I thought about inviting him to come and testify today, but he's a pretty straightforward guy. He might have hurt somebody's feelings. And, you know, when I asked him about things, he kind of alluded to the fact that as far as he's concerned, his industry has really supported higher education in the state of Wyoming. And when he needed help, quite frankly, his feeling is that he didn't get that help that he wanted.
Okay, questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative McGuire. Boy, I was thinking to myself, if we had this bill last year, you could have saved me 15 or 20, or actually a semester as a professor. I dealt with a former student from 15 years ago and 20 years ago. They are now middle-aged women who dropped out of school for a variety of reasons. And to get them back to finish up their last 2 classes took, I can't tell you how many hours of me dealing with the registrar's office to help them through that process. But that being said, I am curious, and your presentation was all about the student who had dropped out of undergraduate school. And so the one question that I had was really about graduate versus undergraduate credit. And I'm curious if you had thought about that distinction, and would it be acceptable to limit it to undergraduate college level credit and not graduate credit?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would prefer to not limit it to undergraduate credit. And I can tell you, and this individual happened to be my mom, who got a bachelor's degree back in the day when, you know, women around here didn't get bachelor's degrees. And she went back and thought about getting her MBA, and basically got the same story that, you know, we're sorry, we can't accept these credits. And, you know, she was at the point where she was just going to do it for the mental exercise. She wasn't going to do it because she needed it for our business or anything like that. So it fell by the wayside. But I would encourage you not to, because again, there are prerequisites. And there are things that can be transferred to a graduate program. And again, to me, drafting this, I tried to use, you know, more of a carrot than a stick. Again, the university or the college has the final say. And all I'm saying is just put it into writing and give it to the individual so that they can at least see it. And again, I would use my Fortran computer programming. I mean, I'm no adult's going to argue about that. On the other hand, I would use the calculus. You know, gosh, if I took calculus in undergraduate and I passed and I got a passing grade and I need a math course to get my MBA, do I really need to go back and take it seems like that's just a barrier that we throw up. And, we need to be encouraging. And these are adults. They're not high school kids. These are adults that want to go back and finish a degree. And, they are going to be serious. And I can tell you from when I went to law school, we had a couple of adults that had returned. They had been out in the real world and came back. And they were, top of the class. They were the ones who were getting the best grades, no question about it. Because they were serious, they knew what they wanted, and they were spending their own money to do it.
Mr. Chairman, I would
Questions for the committee?
I
Follow up?
would just point out follow-up, COBOL with Fortran subroutines. I think I'm still relevant.
Other questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Obermuller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Representative Connolly's comment, I think with your background, have you considered applying at YDOT?
Representative Nyman, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to compliment the bringer of the bill. This is excellent. I appreciate this. I think that it shows us a level of respect for those folks that put their hard-earned time and money into getting these degrees and these credits, and it doesn't take away all their hard-earned investment in that, and it encourages them to look as we change the dynamic of this state to have the opportunity to go back and take advantage of that. And so I just really appreciate you bringing that, Representative, and I look forward to its passage. Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a few, so with your indulgence, I will just fire off the 2 or 3 that I've got. Representative McGuire, I really, really like the idea of this. My brother is I think we all have an anecdotal story, right, of somebody who did this. My brother was one that, I think it was probably my first year in. He actually asked me to run something similar, and I kind of cowered at it, and I said, I don't know about that. More directly to this bill, page 2, line 7 is major cause for concern for me. Case by case basis. Words matter, especially in legislation. Case by case basis is every single case. So we're putting that in there to make us feel good that this is a case by case basis. But can you explain to me why we didn't just put in there the university or college may decline to accept? Why are we putting the case by case basis in there?
Go ahead.
The reason that the language is that way is so, again, if I go in and they look at my transcript, because every transcript is going to be different. When I went to school, the college, I went to a junior college first, and then I went to the university. And at the time that I went to the junior college, there were some real issues. That was pre-2+2, and there were major issues and arguments about the level of calculus that I took at Casper College, or at my local college, and what they offered at the university. So that's why it's on a case-by-case basis. And if you continue on with that, so if they decline to accept that particular credit, it's just asking them, and that's on line number 11 and 12, to reduce it to writing. The student can consider it. And if the student is not accepting that that is a legitimate reason, then going down to line 15, the student has an opportunity to appear before the Board of Trustees or the trustees designee. And I would just point out that any of us, if we went in, let's say we wanted to buy a $200,000 tractor, and we went to the dealer, and the dealer said, how long has it been since you drove a tractor? You said, well, it's been about 15, 20 years. And they said, yeah, you know what? I don't think you can handle this. We want to talk to the boss. And that's, adults are different. Again, I'm saying that there's a difference between a high school kid that's floating around and has no idea what they want to do, and my friend Tom, who wants to get that bachelor's, because honestly, he was being held back in the corporate culture because he didn't have a bachelor's.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, yes. So actually, it's a perfect segue. You mentioned line 15 or its designee, and I have that underlined in that when I looked at this last week. That's probably my biggest concern, because the Board of Trustees, wherever they're at, is likely to determine the registrar's office to be its designee. The registrar's office is the one making the initial call. So you're going to appeal to the same body that told you no the first time. I have cause for concern on that. And I'm just kind of curious if you have thought through the possibility of putting in there your designee, who you think besides the Board of Trustees would be a good designee in an attempt to have a little bit of parity with this.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I tease my wife all the time, if I were king for a day. So yeah, I would be a great designee. There's a lot of things that I would make good decisions about. The reason I left it that way is, for example, in my community, when our trustees run for the Board of Trustees for our local college, we get to know them just like people get to know me as I'm, and so I didn't want to say, okay, you guys have to gather up on September 2nd when school goes and be ready for all of these appeals. I think that they should be able to appoint a designee, and I think that that designee may be a member of the board or something like that. If they do just appoint the same person that's making that initial decision, well, shame on them. And when they stand for re-election, then we can make a point.
Okay, one more question?
Yep. What about the University of Wyoming where they're not elected and they're appointed?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's a soft stick, and I would invite, if you have a better amendment, I'm more than happy to discuss it, but that was the best thing that I could come up with. So thank you.
Other questions from the committee? All right, we're going to open it up to public testimony. Anyone like to testify?
Mr.
Clarissa, do we
Chairman?
have anyone virtually that would like to testify?
Mr. Chairman, we do. We have Dr. Ben Moritz with the Community College Commission, as well as Cindy Delancey.
Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the sponsor of the bill for pointing out the importance of getting more adult students back into college and acknowledging the challenges that they face. The Endow work and the attainment work that has been worked on by across the state over the last year or two really has been focused on how can we remove hurdles that exist that are keeping working adults from getting back to school and getting the skills that they need to get back into the workforce and to move up in their line of work. The only concern that I would have with this particular bill is that many of the aspects of this bill are already in place at the colleges and the university. And so the outcomes of this particular bill, it's hard to tell exactly how that would change the current state of affairs. For example, most of the colleges have explicit policies that coursework does not time out, except for particular areas such as maybe nursing, maybe criminal justice, some of those areas where the content changes over time. And the language typically will say that it does not time out except in these particular areas. And for those areas, the transcripts will be evaluated and a determination will be made. Also, there is already at most of the colleges policies so that if a student finds that their credits are not going to transfer, that there is a method for them to respond and to protest. And usually that does go through the registrar's office. And I don't believe there is anybody from UW, although I did talk with a couple of folks from their admissions and transfer office, and their policies are very similar. The exceptions are, I believe, psychology and nursing. where there is a timeout of, I believe it's 10 years. And again, it's for that same purpose. So that is just a little bit more context that I wanted to provide, and I would be open to any follow-up questions. And I believe that the colleges and the university are definitely, it's in their interest to maximize the amount of transfer credits and returning credits that students, particularly adult students, have. And so I think they would be happy to work with interested parties moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Cindy, I think you're up next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Cindy Delancey, and I'm the president of the Wyoming Business Alliance. And on behalf of our 300 plus members, I speak in strong support of House Bill 231 and really applaud Representative McGuire's efforts on this. Having had the honor and privilege to serve as an appointee by Governor Gordon to the Education Attainment Council and working with Representative Conley on this for the past couple of years now, it sure seems to be really in line with the goals of the Attainment Council work. We need to get non-traditional students back in our education system, and this bill affords an opportunity to just make that on and off ramp as easy for people as possible. Adults have complicated lives, jobs, kids, financial obligations, and trying to determine navigating the bureaucratic maze of what credits can transfer, why not, having this system available to, as Representative McGuire said, a student who wants to be there, who wants to better themselves, who wants to learn new skills, modernize, expand their earning capacity. I think it's sound policy to do everything in our power to open those doors, to give people opportunities, Wyoming people, to attend Wyoming institutions as opposed to being driven online if things are, complicated. So, the easy button feels good right now, especially after a year of a lot of challenges. And, to speak to the testimony that this is already happening, I kind of echo the sentiments of Representative McGuire that if this is already occurring, maybe codification of giving that additional due process for people as far as the steps, for an appeal mechanism, codifying that will just eliminate discrepancies in how our higher learning institutions are going to address those situations when faced with them. So, perhaps there could be some tweaks. I think Representative Brown makes a very good point that, if the registrar ends up being the designee on the appeal, has there really, have you accomplished something there? But it certainly sounded to me that Representative McGuire is willing to maybe work on finding a solution as the bill moves forward. So for these reasons, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we ask for your favorable consideration and give us another tool in our adult learners toolbox to be able to get back in Wyoming higher education, supporting our world-class system and giving these non-traditional students the opportunity to better themselves and help us continue to improve and diversify our workforce. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Do we have anyone else? Clarissa?
Mr. Chairman, I do not see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay. Committee, anyone else in the audience that would like to testify? All right, that'll end the public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Brown, seconded by Summers. You want to work this bill page by page, or what do you want to do? What's your
Mr.
pleasure?
Chairman, I have a quick amendment if I could.
Okay.
On page 2, line 15, after designee, I would motion to insert language that would state, and I'll say this slowly, whom shall not be the same person or governing body who made the initial determination. I'll read that one more time. After designee, insert whom shall not be the same person or governing body who made the initial determination.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, seconded by Conley. Newsom, I'm sorry. Okay, any discussion on the amendment? Yes, Representative Overmuller.
Just a technical question because I'm forgetting my English. I'm just want a clarification. Is it designate whom or designee who?
Should be who.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great technical correction.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, sensing that you're ready to vote, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The amendment is carried. Back on the bill.
Question?
Question on the bill. Roll call.
Representative Andrew,
Aye.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Connolly. Representative Harshman has submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Nyman,
Aye.
Representative Newsom, Representative Obermuller, Representative Summers,
Aye.
Chairman Paxton.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Okay. If you want to. Okay, next bill for our consideration is House Bill 97, and I believe Representative Summers has some comments to make.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And House Bill 97 came out of the Appropriations Committee. So during markup of the budget, the governor made different cuts to different agencies in different places. And if a cut required a statute to basically put in place, then the Appropriations Committee drafted those bills. And this bill was a result of that. And basically what it does is eliminate funding for Wyoming to participate in the Education Commission of States. And, I'll be honest, Mr. Chairman, I don't support the bill. And I think we have some word that maybe the governor's office is, and maybe the vice chair has some information.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, it's your prerogative. I do believe we have a member from the governor's office that may be willing to explain, but I've received communication from their office that this bill is no longer needed.
Okay, Clarissa, if we have Lachelle on board, that'd be an appropriate time to bring her in.
Mr. Chairman, she has been admitted to the meeting.
Okay, go ahead, Lachelle.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Not very good. We can't.
Okay. How about now?
That's better, much better.
Okay, sorry about that. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this was part of the governor's proposed budget reductions. And since that time, in conversations with the Education Commission of the States, they have given Wyoming some grace to actually participate with a reduction in funds. So essentially, we're not asking for these funds to be reinstated. We would just like to continue participating in the compact if the committee's willing to set this bill back. The commission does provide a lot of research and policy support to the state of Wyoming, and we would be one of the only states to leave the compact. And so we're just asking to continue in the compact, not for any funds. We will work with the Department of Education on participating in the level that is required by the commission. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee for Lachelle? Okay, thank you. Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd motion to table this bill.
It's been moved to table the bill. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Summers. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion is tabled indefinitely. Looks like the next bill on our agenda is Education Understanding Federal and State Government. And the representative Harrelson looks like the primary.
He's at home, so he might be on Zoom.
Is he on Zoom?
Mr. Chairman, he is, and he has been admitted to the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for the opportunity to join you today. I would have much rather have joined you guys in person. But here we are, and we are in the middle of a crazy snowstorm, or on the tail end of it. So I'd like to bring before you guys House Bill 177 today. And this is, this concept came forward as I have had the opportunity over the last, I guess, couple months to just see that education is so incredibly important for the advancement of our country as we know it and as we love it. And so this bill before you today, I believe, is going to address an issue that I feel that we have. And so the whole concept of education, understanding federal and state government, this is going to be bringing us or walking us through basically a structure. It's not an education curriculum per se, because it isn't, but this is a structure where we can bring our students into a proper understanding of the history of our nation, of our Bill of Rights, of our Constitution, both state and federal. And this is an opportunity to give our kids a very well-rounded vision of where we started and where we're going, because as Abraham Lincoln said, schoolroom of one generation will be the government of the next. And so I'm going to dive into this bill real quick. And so in section 1, line 13, it's Introduction to Federal and State Government. And on to page 2, each school district providing education in government and civics under the subsection shall provide instruction that prepares students for informed and engaged citizenship in local, state, and national affairs based on an understanding of American history and in an institution of government, the political philosophies that inform them, and the challenges encountered by the nation and its instructions of freedom. Instructions under this subsection shall include, and on page 2, line 11 under I, the history of the United States and the states of Wyoming, state of Wyoming and the impact of these histories on the present. Under second section, line 15, the basic principles of state government and the American constitutional democracy and the application of these principles to the democratic republic. And then line 19, it says study of the Wyoming State Constitution under the subsection, including how the Constitution was developed. Moving on to page 3, under section 4, study of the United States Constitution, including the debates surrounding the adoption of the Constitution and the study of the Declaration of Independence and other essential founding documents, and the ongoing impact of these documents on American institution of self-government. Then into line 8, study of landmark Supreme Court cases and their applications and impact on law and society. Line 11, study of the civic virtues necessary for effective citizenship and participation in the self-governing democratic republic. Line 15, study of the freedoms enumerated in the Bill of Rights and their importance today. And then the protections, not only the freedoms. So in line 18, it says the study of the protections enumerated in the Bill of Rights. And then line 21, the addition of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution and their importance to the civil rights movement and today. And then on page 4, line 4, study of the changing roles of religion in the family in American history. Line 7, study of the threats encountered by the Democratic Republic and free society, including, here's the list: slavery, the political extremism of fascism and communism, religious prejudice and discrimination, identity politics, corruption in government, fiscal mismanagement. And then it goes on in section B on page 5, each school district shall make available during regular business hours for inspection by any parent or guardian of a child enrolled in the school district the curriculum curricular material used to provide instruction under subsection of this section. If the curricular materials are digital, the school district shall provide details to the parents or guardians on how to access the materials, and if necessary, shall make a computer available for this purpose to the parents or guardians to access the materials during regular business hours. And then under section 2, the provisions of WS 21-9-105 created by section 1 of this act shall apply to school districts beginning in the school year 2023 to 2024, and then the enacting clause. So I wanted to, the reason I'm bringing this forward and the reason why I feel this is such a need is recently I've been able to actually speak with a number of students about what is currently being taught in the realm of these topics. And one of the things that I'm finding is that I don't believe that they're getting a fully well-rounded view of the founding of this nation. And if there's ever a time for us to just put a ton of history in front of these students and give them a very broad view and telling them, hey, you know what, we are not here to give you a single viewpoint and nothing else. We're here to give you a broad viewpoint and let you make your own decisions in life, because that's the beauty of American, that option or that ability to step into a place where we can say, you know what, we're going to give you a full option and now you have to make your own decisions. And so this bill, I believe, would be fixing a problem that we currently have, and we'd be giving the opportunity for students to have a really good view of what our founding fathers believed in, what our founding fathers based this nation upon. And right now, currently, in a culture where it seems like we have found the freedoms that made America great being under so much by so many different avenues and venues, I believe that if we could bring this forward, it would do wonders for the history going forward, as far as what this nation is going to look like and what the state is going to look like. And if education is not well-rounded, then it's indoctrination. And we need to be careful that we don't do that. So I think this is a very good idea to bring that forward, and I now stand for questions.
Okay, committee questions. Yes, Representative Somers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Representative Harrelson, welcome virtually. We're sorry you're not here, so thank you. So my question is, when I go into the statutes in 21-9-102, we require the teaching of the Constitution, the state and federal Constitution, 3 years in kindergarten through K-8 and 1 year in secondary. It's mentioned in our basket, basically in our basket of goods. And I really don't understand why we need to be this prescriptive when we already have a requirement.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Somers. On first impression, I would agree with you. What I'm struggling with, though, is this. As I've actually been asking questions of some of our students and asking them along these lines of, hey, what did you learn about fill in the blank? And they're like, well, nothing really. And I'm like, what? And what I'm finding is they don't have a curriculum source that is teaching these concepts. I've had people who have students who have said, well, that's in the Constitution. I'm like, well, where do you see that? That's not in the Constitution. And they're like, well, yeah, it is. And I'm finding that there just isn't a well-rounded knowledge base in regards to our Constitution in the United States, and then the state Constitution as well. They don't understand thoroughly. So why so descriptive? Because I believe it's a need right now. I believe that we are not seeing the education being well-rounded enough. It's in a lot of ways, it's very much tilting more towards a liberal view of education. And because of that, I don't believe that this is being represented properly or effectively.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Harrelson, do you know what the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is?
I would have to look at it right now, ma'am. Sorry, Mr. Chairman and Representative Conley, I'd have to look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Harrelson. It's the right to vote for women.
Okay. Yep.
And it's not included in your bill.
Okay.
And so I was curious about that. And then in relationship to what you call a threat on page 4, which is identity politics. And I'm curious if a woman's right to vote or women's rights is what you call identity politics.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Conley, the 19th Amendment, I would have no problem with that being in there because it definitely needs to be understood. I believe that when we talk about identity politics, this is not about a gender issue, and this is not about a race issue, because if we want to be very honest, we've seen more racism in the last year, in my personal opinion, in the name of no racism, and we've seen more discrimination in the name of no discrimination. And so when I'm talking about identity politics, that's what I'm talking about. We're actually creating a monster. We're creating an issue, in my opinion, where there isn't an issue. And they need to go back and see historically how that has played out in our nation. And I think we'd all agree that things have happened in this nation that we're not all proud of. But the foundation of this nation was not based upon discrimination. That's my honest opinion. And I know that not everyone will agree with me, but that is my honest opinion. So they need to have that honest conversation, and we need to bring it back on to the level that are all men created equal. And when we understand that all men are created equal, when we see that as a fundamental right, every person is created equal, doesn't matter of your race, it doesn't matter of your gender, God has created us as equals, then at that point, the discrimination side, in my opinion, needs to become more of a moot point than it currently is.
Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Representative Harrelson, we're at a bit of a disadvantage because we're missing page 4. Okay, and so Representative Harrelson, if you could kind of enumerate basically line by line what's on your page 4. So if you have other Romanettes, just go through page 4, Romanette, blah, blah, does whatever, that would aid us in getting through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Summers. So just to clarify, you guys don't have page 4 in front of you?
We do not.
Okay.
Some of us do, some of us don't.
It's not in our packet. We're missing page 2 and page 4 over here.
Okay. So I have no problem going through it if you still want me to, Mr. Chairman.
Let us take a look at it just for a second, but I think it probably would be useful for you to go through it.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so starting on page 4, under section 6, the study of these threats encountered by the Democratic Republic and free societies, including number 1, slavery. If there's ever a time that this needs to be discussed, it's now. There's so much surrounding this that has been very much shrouded in I guess a slant is what I would say. Slavery was definitely something that happened in America. Slavery was something that shouldn't have happened in America, but it did. But we have created slavery into a place that has created a position of being stuck, in my opinion, for a people group. And that's a sad place to be. And that was probably, in my opinion, worse than the slavery itself, because we have created a place where people cannot get free from because of their past. So slavery needs to be discussed. It needs to be brought forward, and the different views that slavery was not maybe what it has been painted in this nation completely. Then number B, or subsection B, the political extremists of fascism and communism. There is an advancement of communism or socialism in pretty much every country of the world right now, and I think we're seeing it in America as well. And that idealism goes 100% against what is America. And if we don't understand the fact that there is a battle going on right now in America over the political ideology of freedom and a republic, or a socialistic, communistic regime, then we're blind, because the battle is here. Religious prejudice and discrimination. There is a massive amount of prejudice and discrimination that is happening all over the world. And it goes back to, we may not all agree, we may not all view things eye to eye, but our founding fathers, they gave their lives to give us the freedom to have our ability to worship as we feel we're called to worship. And so it isn't the government's place to be involved in politics, or it isn't the government's place to be involved in the church. It's more the church's place to be involved in the government and to help keep that religious foundation this nation was called upon or based upon moving forward. So that needs to be discussed. The identity politics we've kind of already talked about. Corruption in government. There needs to be a transparency brought into the government. And if we don't have transparency brought into government, then we will continue to see issues arise time and time again. And I think we'd be that hasn't happened. There is definitely, in the last year, I think everyone has been really had their eyes open to the fact that some changes need to take place in this country, and so that needs to be talked about. And then fiscal mismanagement. We need to talk about to learn from our mistakes. We need to understand what our mistakes are, and so they need to realize. Anything from what the financial burden that's placed upon a country during war to just exorbitant in spendings to the programs that are put forward in our country right now governmentally. Those things need to be discussed, and I just think that education is truly ironed out or hammered out when both sides of the coin are shown. And then we get to actually go, you know what, that is a good thing to learn about, because then we can actually make informed decisions about it into the future. And so I'll go back to a statement I made earlier. If we don't have the ability to see all sides of a situation, then at that point, we're not being educated, we're being indoctrinated. And so they need to know what happened. We need to have that in front of us, and students do as well, so they can make a proper decision.
Okay, I think all of us now have the full copies with all the pages in it. So Representative Summers, I believe you had your hand up.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Representative Harrelson, now that I have all the pages, I want to go to that section on page 4, line 7, Romanet 11.
Okay, let me pull that back up.
Yeah, page 4, line
Yep.
7, Romanet 11. Study of threats. So right there, that's a subjective statement that you're putting in there, that anything down below here is a threat or could be a threat to I guess our country through civics. And so I'm really struggling. Usually when we ask to study things, we don't put in a subjective statement on what the threats are. So the threats are fiscal management. Well, that could be bad fiscal management, good fiscal management. I don't know what, but it doesn't fit with what you put in statute.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Sommers. It's mismanagement, not management. So obviously, I believe that a fiscal mismanagement is a threat. I believe that corruption in government is a threat. I do believe that identity politics, that is a threat. Prejudice and discrimination of religion and anything else, that C and D are both on prejudice and discrimination. Those are massive threats. Political extremism, fascism, and communism is a threat, and obviously slavery is a threat and has done so much damage in this country. So, I mean, is that subjective? Sure, it probably is, but obviously those are threats that have been brought against our country, and we could probably add more. If we were to work at it, we probably could, but this is a starter list for sure.
Other questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Haroldson, I appreciate you bringing this forward because I believe 3 out of the past 5 years that I've been in the session, myself and a former Representative Winters and a few others have tried to even muster enough strength to push through the structure of civics education. What I have a concern with this particular bill is you have decided there's no real level of grade level appropriateness, I guess I would say. When I look at this, it says that any school district who performs this underneath this particular set of statutes will be required to teach this kid. So now we've got a 3rd grader learning about federal mismanagement of money. I have a concern with that. I also share the concern that the majority floor leader just brought into this, that you are using a subjective term. Now, that's not to say that I think or I disagree with you that it's a subjective term, your subjectivity on that. It's that I have a serious concern about putting a subjective terminology into our green books. These things are what guide us as a state. So my question to you is, why the specifics? We'll say it that way because that's a lot easier. Why the specifics as opposed to going to the State Board of Education, which I have attempted to do and numerous others have attempted to do, to go to the State Board of Education and have the people who actually develop contents and standards and have them develop this? Why did you go to this level of extreme work and lay this out in the green books?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Brown. To be honest with you, because as we've already heard that this is loosely laid out in the standards. And so it's something that technically is supposed to be happening, maybe not obviously the specific, but in some ways. And what I'm finding is that's, at least in this area, is not the case. And I believe across the country, just looking at the trajectory of belief structure and education, and even conversations that I've been able to have, these topics are not being thoroughly vetted out. And so I went specific because I felt that specific would give us the ability to make this reality, and to give an education that is well-rounded and gives the opportunity for these students to see more than what they are seeing currently.
Anyone else on the committee? I'm wondering if there's someone from the State Department of Education on Zoom that we could hear from, probably be appropriate at this time. So Clarissa, do we have someone from the State Department?
Mr. Chairman, we have Superintendent Balo as well as Ms. Akins.
Okay, I think it'd be appropriate to bring them on board right now, please. Superintendent Balo, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I'm just going to offer some comments, and then Kari and I can field questions as needed. The sponsors of this bill, I'm really grateful to, some of whom are on this committee. And just yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak about the state of civics education at an institute, or at an event hosted by the Reagan Institute. Right now in state legislatures, there are 90 plus bills in 35 states, all aimed at strengthening civics education. Many look similar to this bill, and I appreciate today's debate because in concept, I think we all agree we want our kids to have robust civics education, but this debate has brought to light that maybe this list that is being contemplated is either too specific or not specific enough, or too exclusive. Today we have 2 generations of teachers both our, or excuse me, 2 generations, both our younger teachers and our students who have not benefited from the same robust civics education that you and I hopefully experienced. That is a targeted and intentional education about American exceptionalism through the use of our historic documents and other authentic resources. With the passage of No Child Left Behind over 25 years ago, social studies unfortunately took a back seat in many schools, and that's just the fact. Here's what I might face if I were a teacher today, a high quality teacher today. If I'm looking for something to augment my elementary or secondary classroom, either to augment my outdated social studies book, or maybe I don't even have a social studies book, I would look online. And up until just a few months ago, if I Googled American founding, the Pulitzer Center and lots of other seemingly credible resources would return Project 1619 as a civics curriculum for me to implement in my classroom. This K-12 curriculum, in its original form, which won a Pulitzer Prize, documented or purported the true founding of America as taking place in 1619 versus 1776. The materials from Project 1619 are accessible and they're easy to implement in classrooms. In fact, up until September, over 3,400 schools, probably some in Wyoming, were using these materials. Then somewhere around September, the New York Times, who published Project 1619, removed the term true founding and other references from the documents. And this is really frightening. Civics education is not fluid, it's a foundation. By the way, our state standards include teaching about the significance and the impact of 1619, but not in place of American exceptionalism or as the true founding of our country. This is one of many scenarios. I'm just sharing one that has grabbed a lot of headlines over the last few months. Information and resources are plentiful for teachers, but they're always not checked for accuracy or quality. And they're not always checked. And so we want to make sure to place civics education and social studies front and center again. And this bill just provides an opportunity, a roadmap, if you will, for Wyoming educators and for school districts to discern, distill, and implement civics materials and curriculum that is consistent with a democratic republic and with American exceptionalism. Mr. Chairman and Representative Brown mentioned our standards, and our standards were double checked a couple of years ago for inclusion of civics education, and it's there. The question is it too much when there isn't a curriculum or an assessment that helps to maybe set that roadmap? This bill accomplishes that roadmap and describes what we value in Wyoming civics education and want to make sure that our students have access to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions from the committee?
I do.
Go ahead.
Superintendent Belo, thank you. This is Representative Summers. So my question back to you, you just said that. You just said curriculum, that we don't provide a curriculum. The reason we don't provide a curriculum in statute is it's unconstitutional. So maybe I misunderstood you, but that's what you said.
Mr. Chairman, let me clarify. I may have misstated. If I did say that, I apologize. Curricular materials are selected at the local level by school boards across the state, and they need to be aligned with our state standards. Again, our state standards include civics education, but they don't highlight necessarily some of the tenets that are laid out in this bill.
Okay. Yeah, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, I'm concerned with this bill, and mainly because of something that's already been discussed. And I guess I'm curious on your thoughts on this. As you say that we need some more guidance towards civics education. And then of course, you and I and many others have fought for civics education. And heck, I've even gone to St. Louis with you and your team to try to fight for civics education in our area here. but I'm really concerned about page 4 and the support coming from this office saying that the study of threats encountered by this democratic republic and free society, including slavery, the political extremists of fascism and communism, you name through there, that's a very subjective and very, very pointed and skewed, if I'll say it, view of our history and what we're going on here. So I'm kind of curious, your support for this bill includes the support for that language. Can you explain why?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for not waiting for you. Mr. Chairman, Representative Landon, I want to be clear that I support this bill in concept. I think it has work, and it's 152 right now. And that's unfortunate. But I do think the direction from the legislature to teach American exceptionalism is important. Do I support the specifics on page 4? I'm not sure that's for me to decide, but what I support is this process of debate and the points that you've brought up, the points that Representative Connolly have brought up, and I share some of those concerns, but at the end of the day, I don't have a voice in the vote. But I would put forth that I think that any efforts by the legislature to underscore American exceptionalism and what we value as a democratic republic is worthy of consideration. And apparently 35 states are also agreeing with Wyoming in concept as well.
Okay, we're running a little short of time here, and I would like to dispose of this, get a vote on this bill before the end of the session. So, Kari, did you have some remarks that you'd like to make before we move on, or are you okay?
Mr. Chairman, I'm on in case any member of the committee have questions specifically for department staff. I have other department staff in the waiting room as well, if there are just specific questions.
Okay, I think we'll just open it up to public comment. So anyone in the audience that would like to, yes, come forward, please. State your name and who you represent, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association, speaking in opposition to this legislation. Mr. Chairman, I think you know, on a personal level, civics education is exceedingly important to me. Besides my professional endeavors, I'm also the Congressional District Coordinator for the Wyoming We the People program, which I like to think of as the premier civics education program in the state of Wyoming. Mr. Chairman, I also taught American and Wyoming government at the university for 8-10 years. And frankly, the list here wouldn't make a third of what was on my syllabus for American and Wyoming government at the University of Wyoming. There's notable missing pieces: American political institutions, American political parties, public opinion, all kinds of other elements that are necessary in the study of American Wyoming government. Frankly, I don't see much here about the Wyoming government itself. But Mr. Chairman, I guess more than anything, the reason for our opposition is nowhere else in statute do we go out spelling out what's in the content of any area of instruction. We don't do this for math. We don't do this for science. We don't do this for any other area content of knowledge. And you've referenced the standards, and that really is the place to do it. And I would line up behind people, Representative Brown, others, to strengthen our Wyoming standards for civic education. I think we can and should do that, but doing it in statute really is not the place. You've already pointed out a couple of places in Wyoming statute where there is the requirement that civic education be included. And Mr. Chairman, I guess just to be very quick, and there's a lot more I'd love to say, but just to be very quick on this, I will say that the We the People program does offer free professional development for Wyoming teachers who want to be involved in that program. The Sheridan team won the competition this year. They went to the Nationals, done fantastic. Laramie's been great there. Cheyenne's got some great schools there. Casper's had some good schools. We've got them from all across the state, and there are professional resources and opportunities for our teachers, and a great program. I'd love to talk to anybody more about it who wants to know more about that program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else? Yes, Janine. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Janine Bayteski from Teton County. I would just like to add, if you look at the fiscal note, it says there is no cost to this. As we all know, that when we adopted the legislated Indian Education for All, the reason it struggled is because it was said that there was curriculum already available, there was no cost associated, and that proved to be not true. So just a note of caution, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead. Representative Newsom has a question for you, Janine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 5, on line 1, it starts with shall make available curriculum. Do you already make available all the curriculum to parents?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we also have a government class, by the way, that we offer that's an AP government class. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public testimony? Oh,
Mr. Chairman,
just a minute. We got one more question from, okay, all right. He's okay, he said. So anyone else like to testify? Who do you have, Carissa?
we have two folks on Zoom, Tate Mullen and Boyd Brown.
Okay, appreciate brevity. We're running out of time, but thank you. Give your name and who you represent, please.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Tate Mullen. I'm with the Wyoming Education Association. I'll be very brief. I want to echo some of the arguments that have been laid out prior here. This is redundant. We already have these this program within our basket of goods. We also do have some great programs. So Brian mentioned We the People. There is iCivics, Project Citizen. These are inherently unbiased, objective approaches towards civics education. I was a civics educator at the University of Wyoming as well as Front Range Community College. I love the idea of expanding this, but I don't think that this piece of legislation is the proper place to do it or is the proper vehicle. And I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Boyd Brown, I believe you're up next, maybe.
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown, Superintendent, Laramie County School District Number 1. I just want to echo a couple things. Civics and U.S. history are in both the statutes and rules and regulations for the Wyoming Department of Ed. In my opinion, this statute would go beyond even rules and regs and content and performance statute or content and performance standards and almost go to the point of curriculum. So I think that I support moving forward with strengthening civics education, but I do not believe that this bill is the way to get there. I think that that would be going through the rules and regs process or going through the content and performance process with the state board. With that, I'll step testimony and take any questions.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Do we have anyone else, Clarissa?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have anyone else on Zoom.
Okay, let's end public testimony at that point. What's your pleasure, committee? Who did I hear say that? Oh, Representative Nyman moved the bill and seconded by Representative Andrew. Okay, discussion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote no on this bill. You know, there is an opportunity, I think, in statute to make some move, and that would be to change the number of years. So if you want to see, for example, 2 years in secondary, you know, I think that's a really good discussion, or 4 years from kindergarten through K-8, you know. But I don't support putting curriculum in statute, and I think this looks like curriculum. So on and against.
Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be a no vote on this. However, if this does come out of committee, I will have one heck of a committee of the whole amendment that will hopefully strengthen what we're trying to accomplish here, because in absolutely no way, shape, and form do I think that we shouldn't be teaching civics. Again, I've carried similar bills forward over the past 3 out of the past 5 years. This one goes too far, so I will be a no vote.
Okay, anyone else? Representative Obermueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, part of the undercurrent from the bringer of this bill has been, to introduce that maybe Christian perspective has been lacking in public education. I respect that, and to a large degree even believe that. But that makes it, for me, a local decision-making process. School boards are made up of the members of the community, and whether the community happens to lean toward a stronger Christian view or a secular view. I mean, we have a variety of thought in this state that I think we need to allow. And so this particular bill seems to have that undercurrent for me. So I'm going to be a no. Thank you.
Okay, further comments? Yes, Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and I realize where we're kind of going with this, but I think, you know, as a signer or as co-signer on this, I think what was bringing from my mind was what we just did. And we brought to light some things here in this discussion that we need to, I believe, as a state and as a country, to recognize that a lot of our young people, I fear, and I can give examples, but I don't have time and we want to get out of here. But I think there comes from a level of frustration about the lack of understanding of who we are as a nation, and the quality that we have here and the exceptionalism of America. And I very much appreciate Superintendent Balo's comments on that. I think people want to have folks taught and reiterated and driven home in our schools of how exceptional. I mean, 4% of the population of the world puts out more books, more plays, more patents, more anything than anybody else in the world combined. And we've got half the world's population lives on $2 a day, and if half of that population lives on less than $1 a day. And do our young people really realize how blessed they are? And we get that from our history. And our fear, I think, is a lot of times is when we heard it mentioned, the 1619 Project is trying to rewrite our American history. As far as I'm concerned, America started in 1776. When we made a declaration to be free and allow the freedoms that we enjoy right around this room and in this state right now to come to fruition. And we fought against very awful things. And there's been people trying to go back in and try to rewrite the truth of where we came from as a nation and our equality and our equity. And that's a fear. And that's a very real fear by a lot of folks out in this state. And I think this conversation was exceptional, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I think, you know, it'd be pretty hard to find too many people that would disagree with the concepts that are put forward in this, but the level of specificity and the other issues that we've talked about, really, this is probably not ready for prime time. And so I'm going to be a no on the bill. And any other comments? Yes, Representative Conley, did you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, on and against. And honestly, the discussion regarding slavery that has happened both explicitly and implied, I find very, very problematic. And I'll just leave it at that because I think the public needs to understand that we all do not share the same perspective that we heard from the bringer of the bill and the conversation about the 1619 Project. We all don't agree on that perspective. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll just stop.
Okay. Further questions, comments? Sensing that you're ready to vote? Question has been called. Roll call vote, please.
Representative Andrew,
Aye.
Representative Brown,
No.
Representative Connolly, Representative Harshman, Representative Nyman,
Aye.
Representative Newsom, Representative Obermuller, Representative Summers,
No.
Chairman Paxton.
No.
6 noes, 3 ayes. Hmm? Oh, I'm sorry. I marked you as a yes. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for the opportunity.